Street boy gave his only meal to a millionaire crying alone in the desert. What he said will stay with you. He kicked the car door so hard the alarm went off, even though the battery was dead. Smoke still curled up from the engine, stubbornly. As the California desert sun began to scorch the asphalt, Santiago looked around. Nothing. No gas station, no houses, not a sign of life. Just dust, silence, and the sinking realization that he was miles away from the most important meeting of his career. He clutched his phone like a lifeline. Black screen, no signal, no battery. He hurled it onto the seat in frustration, then dropped onto the edge of the road, his tailored blazer soaked in sweat, expensive leather shoes coated in dust. And there, alone, breathing hard, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. But there was something he didn't know yet. Across the city, Mateus was counting coins with the focus of a magician. One by one, he stacked them on the bakery counter while the cashier frowned, clearly. Impatient. The boy adjusted the oversized shirt hanging off his thin frame and smiled, as if that alone could make up for the delay. Finally, he placed the last cent. With a deep breath of relief, he took the ham sandwich, carefully wrapped, and the small box juice he had been craving. That would be his only meal of the day, maybe the week. He stepped out of the bakery with light steps, but his eyes stayed sharp. The world had never been kind to him, and he had learned early that the streets don't forgive dreamers. Back on the highway, Santiago was trying to walk. 3 steps. Stop. The suit clung to his skin and time was slipping away faster than he could think. The meeting that would decide the merger of his company and his future as CEO was starting in less than an hour. Being late would be catastrophic. And for the first time, there was no one to fix it for him. No driver, no assistant, just the dry wind and the bitter taste of powerlessness. That's when he heard it. A low, squeaky sound of tires, faint, persistent, almost absurd. Santiago turned, and what he saw felt like a hallucination. A boy on a bike was pedaling slowly along the road, his small frame hunched under the weight of an old backpack. As he got closer, he stopped, took off a worn-out baseball cap, and looked Santiago in the eye. "Are you okay, sir?" Santiago tried to answer, but his throat was too dry. He just shook his head, a tired, silent no. The boy got off his bike and without a word opened his backpack. He pulled out the sandwich wrapped in a paper napkin and the juice box. He held them out to the man kneeling by the roadside. "It's not much, but it's what I've got." Santiago closed his eyes. He wanted to say no, to explain that he didn't need it, that he was a millionaire, that this gesture was unthinkable. But he couldn't. The kindness, so raw and unfiltered, hit something deep inside him. He took a breath, reached out, touching the sandwich like it was something sacred. And for the first time that day, or maybe that year, his eyes filled with tears. "What's your name?" he asked, voice rough. "Mateus." That's when everything started to change, because Mateus didn't just offer the food. He pointed to his bike. "If you want, I can take you into town. It's far, but I know the way." Santiago looked at the bike, then at the boy, then at the blazing sky. And he smiled, shaking his head in disbelief. It was ridiculous. And yet somehow it made perfect sense. He climbed on the back, his shirt wrinkled, blazer thrown over one shoulder, tie loosened around his neck. The bike groaned in protest, but moved forward. And down that deserted highway, a suited executive and a street kid began a journey that would change everything. But neither of them knew that the trip would end in front of a door, and behind it, a face Mateus would never forget. The sound of the chain turning was steady, like a breath drawn through clenched teeth. Each pedal stroke from Mateus took effort, and every pothole jarred. Santiago like a long-buried memory. They didn't speak, but something passed between them, a silent truce between two worlds that were never meant to meet. Santiago tried to calculate. Time, distance, options. His mind worked like a machine, designed to prevent loss. But something was broken this morning, something numbers couldn't fix. He watched the boy in front of him, skinny, unevenly shaved hair, sweat-soaked back, hunched with effort. And then, without warning, a memory hit him like a punch. Himself, 12 years old, sitting in the yard of an orphanage, counting coins to buy a pair of used shoes. The childhood he pretended never happened was still there, deep inside, but there was something Mateus wasn't saying. The bike turned onto a narrow alley far from the main road. The boy knew shortcuts not even GPS could track. They passed. Graffiti-covered walls, street vendors, abandoned cars. A dog barked loudly. Mateus didn't flinch. His eyes had been trained to ignore what couldn't be changed. "Where you headed?" he asked without turning. "Downtown. M&B Corporation building. Can you get me close?" Mateus nodded vaguely. After a pause, he mumbled, "M&B, I've heard of that." Santiago didn't answer. It bothered him. His company was well known, but not in neighborhoods like this, or at least not for good reasons. They rode on, a few more blocks, a few more awkward silences. Then Santiago asked, "And you live around here?" "Sometimes," the answer hung in the air. No irony, no sadness, just a plain fact. Like someone who's accepted there's no such thing as a home, only places your body can survive the night. Santiago took a deep breath. He wanted to ask about his parents, but something in Mateus's tone stopped him, because deep down, he already knew the answer. Or at least, was afraid to hear it. That's when Mateus turned onto a wider street and pointed at a rundown building. That used to be the shelter. Closed a few months back, after a woman disappeared. Santiago turned, startled. "Disappeared?" Mateus nodded. "She used to work there, talked to us like we mattered. One day she left, said she was going to get help, never came back." Santiago narrowed his eyes. A strange unease stirred in his chest, but he let it go. It had to be coincidence. The bike rolled through streets that seemed forgotten by time. Cracked pavement, crooked power poles, silent people on porches, and every face they passed looked at Santiago with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. What was a man in a loosened tie doing on the back of a beat-up bike in a place like this? But Santiago didn't know anymore either. Everything he'd controlled, schedules, meetings, outcomes, felt distant now, and Mateus's presence, so genuine and simple, stripped away his armor. Then they turned one last corner and Santiago saw the city skyline. "There it is," he pointed, finally letting himself exhale. Mateus stopped, parked the bike at the curb. His arms were shaking slightly. He was exhausted, but said nothing. Santiago got off, smoothing out his wrinkled blazer, trying to regain his posture. But before heading inside, he looked at the boy. Something inside him said this moment needed more. "Come with me, just for a minute." Mateus hesitated. "Why?" "Because you saved my day, and I—" His voice cracked. "I think there's something. In there you need to see." That's when everything fell apart, because behind those glass doors a photograph was waiting, and what was in it would change everything. The automatic doors of M&B slid open with a metallic sigh. The marble lobby, lit by cold white lights, felt like another world compared to the streets they'd just left. Santiago walked fast, ignoring. The stares from receptionists and executives whispering to each other as he entered, with a street kid in worn-out clothes and a rusty bike in tow. Mateus walked 2 steps behind, eyes wide, trying to take it all in. The high ceilings, the modern art on the walls, the smell of expensive coffee and artificial perfume. Everything in that building screamed, "You don't belong here." But he didn't flinch. He just shoved his hands into the pockets of his torn jeans and kept walking. Santiago stopped in front of the mirrored elevator. He pressed the button for the 27th floor. As they ascended, both remained silent. Santiago adjusted his tie in a rush, checking his reflection, trying to recover the authority he'd lost on the highway. But his eyes, even now, carried something. He couldn't hide vulnerability. "Why'd you bring me here anyway?" Mateus asked bluntly. Santiago hesitated. The elevator kept rising. Each floor was like a rung on a ladder between 2 different worlds. "Because there's something I think you should see." "What?" "I'm not sure, I just felt it. When you mentioned that woman who disappeared from the shelter," he swallowed hard. "It triggered something." Mateus didn't reply, but his eyes locked on. The reflection of the 2 of them. The contrast between their clothes, their faces, their lives, and still, something connected them. On the 27th floor, the hallway was as quiet as a cathedral. Santiago led the boy into a glass-walled room where a wall display showcased the company's founders. Photos, dates, bold slogans, and in the center, a smaller frame, a discreet portrait, a woman with her hair pulled back, serious eyes, and a sad smile. The caption read, Sofia Mendes, M&B Social Responsibility Program, in memoriam. Mateus stopped, and time stopped with him. His eyes widened, his body froze. He took 2 steps toward the portrait, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. That, he whispered, that's my mum. Santiago felt the floor drop out from under him. Your mom. It's her. Sofia. That's what she was called. She worked at the shelter. She took care of me. Then she disappeared. No one ever explained it right. They said she ran off. Maybe did something wrong. But I never believed that. The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry. He just stared at the photograph like it was a ghost come to life. Santiago stepped closer, heart pounding like a drum. That photo's been there since we created the memorial for staff from the social program. Sofia vanished shortly after a pilot project she ran failed. There was a complaint, the funding got cut. The company let her go, we never heard from her again. Mateus looked up at him, and for the first time, their silence was full of something more. Tension. Your company fired her. It was a board decision. I wasn't directly involved at the time. I was still vice president. But yes, M&B shut the program down. We thought she'd left on her own. Mateus slowly shook his head, as if every word confirmed a pain he'd carried for years, as if every night he'd waited for his mother now had a new and crueler reason. You took her away from me. No, it wasn't like that, Santiago tried, but his voice wavered. Yes, it was. And then, you forgot. You hung a picture on a wall to clear your conscience, and just moved on. That's when everything between them collapsed, because the silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was grief. It was anger. It was a 12-year-old boy staring at the man who, without even knowing it, had been part of the machine that crushed his life. You brought me here for what? To see this? To make me swallow one more loss? Santiago wanted to say no. Wanted to explain, but no words were enough. Mateus turned, walked to the elevator, eyes shining with held-back frustration. But before pressing the button, he said, without looking back, you saved me out there on the road, but in here your people destroyed me. And the elevator doors closed. But Santiago didn't know yet that those words carried more than pain. They carried a truth that would force him to choose between guilt and redemption. He stood in the hallway for what felt like forever, staring at the closed elevator like someone waiting for something they already knew wouldn't return. The building came back to life around him. Executive chatter, hurried footsteps, email pings. But none of it felt real. What was real had just ridden that elevator down and out of his life, taking with it the one chance to make things right. He tried to go back to the meeting, sat at the glass table, looked at the charts, the numbers, the polished corporate lingo he once found comforting. But the words of the board blurred. When his name was called to vote on the merger, he simply stood up and walked out. No one understood, not even him. He took the stairs, 27 flights. He wanted time. He wanted to feel the burn in his legs, as if the physical pain could match the other kind, the one that had a name, Sofia, and a voice, the boy who now hated him. But there was something he still didn't know. Mateus hadn't completely left. He was sitting on the curb outside the building, bike leaning next to him, warm juice box in hand. He wasn't crying, just staring at the ground, like he was trying to gather the shattered pieces of everything that had just broken. Santiago saw him from a window on the 6th floor. He ran down the remaining flights, burst through the revolving doors like a man trying to outrun himself. "Mateus," he called, still out of breath. The boy stood slowly, saying nothing, just tightened the strap of his backpack, like bracing. "For another blow, I need to tell you everything, even if you never want to see me again." Too late. The reply was sharp, but there were cracks in the armor. Santiago took a breath, sat down next to him on the curb, people passing. By stared, whispered, A man in a suit sitting on the street next to a homeless kid. But he didn't care. When your mum came to work with us, she believed she could change the system from the inside. She created that outreach program on her own. She convinced the board, with stories, with data. She even used her own salary to feed kids who weren't in the registry. But then one of the investors found out some of the social funds were being used off-plan. A complaint was filed. She was let go. She vanished soon after. I tried to find her, but she was just gone. Matthias swallowed hard. No one ever thought maybe she did it because she had to? That maybe she was trying to save lives? Santiago nodded. I thought it, but I didn't fight for her. And that's eaten away at me ever since. The boy looked at him for the first time, not with anger, but not with forgiveness either. She used to tell us we had to believe in people, even when they didn't believe in us. That one day someone would show up, someone who would actually listen. And I didn't listen, Santiago whispered. The silence between them wasn't hostile anymore. It was heavy, full of shared grief, unspoken words, mutual loss. Then Matthias stood up. I need to go. Santiago jumped up too. Let me take you, give you a ride home. I don't have a home. Then tell me where I can find you. Matthias hesitated, then climbed onto his bike. If I want to be found, I'll come back. And he rode off. The bike vanished into traffic, and Santiago stood there, hands in his pockets, a hollow feeling in his chest. But that night, when he returned to his silent penthouse, he found something unexpected in the pocket of his blazer. The juice box the boy had given him, still sealed. Crushed, warm, and for the first time in years, Santiago cried, because it wasn't just a juice box. It was a promise, a sign that maybe, just maybe, there was still time to make things right. But what if the boy never comes back? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that like button, The sky was grey the first time Santiago returned to that street. 2 days had passed since he last saw Matthias disappear between cars on that tired old bike. 2 days of trying to live normally, answering emails, reviewing contracts. But everything sounded like static. He couldn't walk right, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat without thinking about the boy. The pain he'd always shoved under the table was now laid bare. He got the address from the shelter's former coordinator, had to lie, said it was for an M&B social impact report. No one questioned him. After all, who would suspect that the CEO of the city's coldest company was out looking for a homeless kid? The alley was narrow and damp. It smelled of mold and burnt oil. Kids played with bottle caps. An older woman stitched fabric under the shade of a torn tarp. Santiago walked slowly, like a man entering sacred ground without permission. And then he saw it, the bike leaning against a spray-painted wall, torn seat, bent back wheel, and next to it, Matthias, lying on a stained mattress, reading an old book. Hey, Matthias didn't answer. Just turned the page like Santiago was background noise. I brought food, Santiago said, holding up a bag filled with bread, fruit, juice. I already ate. Can't hurt to have more. Matthias slowly sat up, setting the book aside. He looked at the bag, then at Santiago. You here to see me, or just to pay off your guilt? Santiago swallowed hard. I came because I can't stop thinking about you, about everything you said, and because what? Because maybe I need you more than you think. Matthias raised an eyebrow. Funny, that's what my mom used to say, that one day someone would need me, but she left too. Santiago sat beside him on the cold ground, ignoring the way his expensive suit soaked up the damp pavement. I'm not going anywhere. Everyone goes, not me. Matthias looked him straight in the eyes, and then in a whisper that hit like a punch, he said, If you were my dad, you would have found me sooner. Santiago took the blow like a stone to the chest. He lowered his gaze, not because it was true, but because it hurt to be seen as someone who could have been and wasn't. I never knew about you, he said, almost pleading. I didn't even know she had a son. So that makes it okay. That's how you slept at night while I slept on the floor. No, it's not okay. That's why I'm here. Matthias stood, angry. You think a juice box and a bag of bread make up for years of pain? You think that fixes anything? No, but it's a start. Then start by telling the truth, all of it. Why didn't you look for her? Why did you let my mom just vanish? Because the truth is, the company, me, we were scared of what we might find. Scared? That the complaint was real. That she actually did something wrong. It was easier to forget than to face the fact we might have judged her unfairly. Matthias let out a bitter laugh. And now you want to save me to feel better? About yourself? No, I want to know you. Okay then, answer this. If you had known I was your son, would you have done anything differently? The question hung in the air like a lightning bolt. Santiago couldn't answer, because any answer would sound fake, and the silence he chose was the worst one of all. Yeah. That's what I thought, Matthias said, grabbing his bike. He climbed, on with fury. But before pedaling off, he looked over his shoulder. My mom believed in miracles, I only believe in distance. And he was gone. What he didn't know was that Santiago, in that moment, made a decision. One that would risk everything he had ever built. The M&B boardroom was tense with silence. The shareholders were waiting for the final vote. The merger with the Japanese multinational would bring billions, global expansion, a new HQ, sleeker chairs. But Santiago heard none of it. His eyes were fixed on the city skyline, a city where Matthias was riding alone, carrying not just a worn backpack but the scar of an abandonment no one ever explained. Mr. Santiago, we need your vote. He turned. The voice sounded distant, like it came through a tunnel. I vote no, he said, and the room froze. Everyone looked at each other. A ripple of whispers spread. The merger required a unanimous vote. Santiago's no wasn't just shocking. It was a declaration of war. Could you repeat that? One director asked. I vote no, he repeated. I can't approve a project that stands for everything that's pulled me away from what matters. This is irrational. This is a historic moment, a female executive argued. Exactly. And I don't want to be remembered as the man who made history without a soul. He stood, grabbed his briefcase, walked to the door under a storm of stunned stares. Before leaving, he said just one thing. I'd rather lose money than lose more people. Outside, a steady drizzle had begun to fall. Santiago walked to his car but didn't get in. He just leaned against it, letting the rain soak his face, as if trying to wash off decades of the wrong choices. But there was still something left to do. He returned to the old shelter, the place Matthias had once called home. He broke through, the rotting wooden door. The stench of mildew, waste, and abandonment hit hard. Old mattresses, toy fragments, graffiti-covered walls. At the end of a hallway, he found the former coordinator's office. Among torn folders and scattered papers, there was a cardboard box. Inside, a blue-covered notebook, Sophia's handwriting. Matthias, 9 years old. Today he smiled for the first time since he arrived. The pages were filled with notes, dreams, drawings, a record of love. Every page was a battle to keep her son alive in a crumbling world. Santiago read silently, hands trembling, until he found a folded page, a letter, addressed to him. If you're reading this, something went wrong. Or maybe you finally decided to look where you never wanted to. I loved working with these kids, but I know I opened boxes the company wanted shut. They might try to silence me. But here's my truth. Matthias is all I have. If anything happens to me, find him and tell him he's better than all this. Santiago closed his eyes and broke. There on the wet floor, surrounded by peeling walls, he cried like never before, not for the billions lost, but for never listening to that woman while she was alive, for not fighting for her, and most of all, for nearly repeating the same mistake with the son he never knew he had. But there was a chance, one last chance. The next morning, he went downtown, not to work, but to search. He walked alley to alley, asked around in bakeries, spoke to recyclers, slept in his car, showed people the photo of Matthias from the building's security footage. Have you seen this kid? No one knew, or no one would say. Or maybe they just didn't want to get involved. On the third day, he fell asleep on the bench where he first saw the boy, woke up with the sun in his face, dry mouth, looked around, nothing. Then, he saw it. The bike, parked on the sidewalk and hanging from the handlebars, a piece of paper, Your company took everything from my mom, but you gave me a piece of her back. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I'm thinking about it. No name. But Santiago knew. It was him. He smiled for the first time in days. A crooked, exhausted smile, but a real one. Because even without seeing Mateus's face, he knew the boy was still out there. What happens next? That part is still unwritten. The note stayed between Santiago's fingers for hours. He read it like someone decoding an ancient language, not through the words, but through the silence between them. I don't know if I can forgive you, but as I'm thinking about it, it wasn't a no, it was a crack in the wall, a thread of light, and in a lifetime full of closed deals and final decisions, nothing had ever hit Santiago harder than that hesitant sentence from a street kid. That morning he didn't go home, didn't go to the office. Instead, he stopped by the corner bakery and bought the exact same meal Mateus had once offered him, a ham sandwich wrapped in plain white paper and a strawberry juice box. He didn't know why, he just knew he needed to carry it with him. He went back to the abandoned shelter, now lit by the morning sun streaming through the broken roof tiles. He sat on the floor, just like he had days before, and placed the meal on a wooden crate like a makeshift table, and then he waited. The hours passed slowly. Curious kids peeked in through the door. A few neighbors asked if he was okay. He answered with a nod and a quiet smile, but he didn't move. He waited, like someone planting a seed in the desert, stubbornly believing rain would come. Then he felt it. First the sound, bike tires squeaking against asphalt. Then the scent, not of oil or gasoline, but of someone who'd been running all morning. Sweat, dust, and childhood. Santiago turned his head slowly. There he was, Mateus, standing in the doorway, bike in hand, eyes guarded. "What are you doing?" "Here," the boy asked. Santiago pointed to the sandwich and juice, waiting. "Waiting for what?" "For as long as you need." Mateus stepped inside, his eyes scanning the place. He sat across from Santiago but didn't touch the food. He just stared at the man who, days earlier, had been nothing more than a stranger. "In a suit on the side of a road, you slept here." "Last night, yeah, almost the night before too," Mateus frowned. "But you're rich." "I used to be more. But I've never felt as empty as I did before this." A light silence settled between them, not cold, just curious. "Why that sandwich?" Mateus asked. Santiago smiled. "Because it was the best one I ever had. And because that day, it didn't just taste like food, it tasted like hope." Mateus didn't respond, but he picked up the juice, took a sip, then grabbed the sandwich, broke it in half and handed Santiago a piece, saying nothing, and they ate together, like two boys on recess in a school that never existed. That's when something shifted. "You read the notebook?" Mateus asked suddenly. Santiago nodded, every word. "She wrote beautiful things, didn't she?" "She did. And she loved you in a way that almost made me jealous." Mateus lowered his eyes. "I used to think she'd come back. Then I thought she'd left me. But now, it's different. Now I know she tried. And that changes everything." Santiago took a deep breath. "She never left you. They took her away, and I was one of the people who let that happen. But I'm trying to change that now." Mateus looked at him more softly this time, as if the armor around his chest was finally starting to crack. "Why do you keep showing up?" "Because you gave me something no one else has. Truth. And what are you going to do with that?" Santiago pulled the notebook from his bag. He'd kept it safe like a treasure. "Change things. What they took from you, from her, I'm going to give back, even if it takes the rest of my life." Mateus took the notebook gently, ran his fingers across his mother's handwriting. As he flipped through the pages, something slipped out, a small folded sheet. He opened it, a simple crayon drawing, a boy holding the hand of a man in a suit. In the corner, a childlike sentence. "When I grow up, I want to find my dad." Mateus froze. Santiago did too. The words echoed through the space like a prophecy, late but still alive. And in that moment, without saying a thing, they both knew. There was something deeper between them than just coincidence. There was fate. But what they'd do with it, that was a risk they'd have to face together. The next morning, Santiago didn't go to work. For the first time in decades, he turned off his phone, ignored his calendar, and didn't feel guilty at all. He felt something else, a strange mix of nervousness and gratitude, new emotions for a man who had always lived by forecasts, not feelings. He waited outside the shelter, sandwich and juice in hand. He didn't know if Mateus would show up, but he waited. And then, just as the sun began to warm the crooked rooftops, the bike appeared at the corner. Same worn tires, same old backpack. But something in Mateus's eyes had changed. Less weight, more curiosity, like someone who still doesn't trust, but wants to try. "You're still here?" the boy asked as he got off the bike. "Still here. How long you planning to stay?" "As long as you'll let me." Mateus didn't answer, but he took the juice from Santiago's hand and drank. Quietly, they sat once more on the shelter floor, unhurried, as if the abandoned building had become some kind of strange temple where the past bled and the present was learning how to breathe. Santiago opened a leather folder he'd brought. Inside were documents, papers, contracts. Mateus frowned with suspicion. "You're not trying to adopt me already, are you?" Santiago laughed. "No, not yet, but I want to show you something." He handed over a single sheet. At the top, in simple, humble lettering, it read, "Sofia Mendes Foundation, Center for Family Support and Care. It's for kids like you, and for people like your mum once was. It won't depend on big corporations or shareholders. It'll be funded with my personal income and run by people who actually understand people. I want to start right. Here," he added, "in this building, restore it, rebuild it, bring life back to what was left to rot." Mateus scanned the paper, trying hard to act like it didn't touch him, but it did. Every comma, every name. "You really think you can fix everything with this?" "No, but I think I can start. And if you want, you can be part of it." "Doing what? You're going to give me a job title?" "No. But I can give you something rarer." "Like what?" "A place to return to, a place to call yours, where no one can send you away." Mateus took a deep breath. His eyes began to burn, but he didn't want to cry. "Not here, not yet. My mum used to say no place is home, not until someone remembers you exist. And I see you, Mateus, not as charity, not as debt, but as someone I want close, even if you never forgive me." The boy stood up, took a few steps, looked at the cracked ceiling, the peeling walls, the names scribbled on every door. And then, for the first time, he smiled. "If we're fixing this place up, we're going to need paint, and a lot of cement, and someone who knows these alleys, and how to fix a bike or two." Mateus laughed, short, a little shy, but it was a laugh. "I know where we can get good paint, for free. So, you're in?" Mateus didn't answer right away. He walked back to his backpack, pulled out his mom's notebook, opened to a blank page, and with a borrowed blue pen he wrote, "Day 1 Sofia Foundation Project. Today felt like a beginning." Santiago caught a glimpse but looked away, respecting the boy's space. "You want to write the story, don't you?" "Someone has to tell it right. She never got that chance. Then this place will have a library, and people who actually listen." Mateus nodded, then looked directly at Santiago. "I'm still scared. Me too. But I want to try." And that's when everything changed, because in that moment the word try was more powerful than any promise. It was the missing link. Not a guarantee of a happy ending, but a promise of a beginning. And as they walked down the neighborhood street side by side, one on a bike, the other on foot, people watched. Some whispered, but no one really understood what was happening. Because it didn't look like charity, and it didn't feel like rescue. It looked like family. But neither of them knew. The past was still holding one final piece. The building was beginning to change, not yet with machines or construction, but with presence. People began showing up, sweeping, hauling out debris. Santiago came every day, no suit, no schedule. He carried boxes, painted walls, learned how to mix cement. But most importantly, he learned how to listen. Mateus was there too. At first, just watching, then participating. He painted murals on the inside walls, came up with names for the rooms. And one day, in his own handwriting, he wrote above the front door, "Here, no one starts from zero. You start from now." But there was something he still hadn't told. Santiago. Something he'd carried in silence since he found that drawing in his mother's notebook. The sentence, "When I grow up, I want to find my dad." Mateus read it every night before falling asleep on the thin mattress in his temporary room at the shelter, the notebook tucked beneath his pillow. And with each reading, the doubt grew stronger. What if he had already found him? One afternoon, he walked into the makeshift office where Santiago was organizing foundation paperwork, notebook in hand. "Can I?" he asked. "Of course," Santiago said, setting the documents aside. Mateus sat across from him and placed the open notebook on the desk, the page with the drawing in full view. "I drew this when I was 8. She kept it until the end." Santiago looked at it. The boy, the man in a suit, and the child's handwriting. "It's beautiful, powerful. It's not just pretty," Mateus said. "It's a question, a request." Silence. Mateus continued. "She wrote about you, in the last pages. I only had the courage to read them yesterday. She said she tried to reach out to you but never could, that she met you at the company, that she was scared, and in the end, she thought maybe it was better if you never knew." Santiago went pale. "She knew me?" Mateus nodded. He flipped to the final page. Sophia's handwriting, shaky, worn. "He'll never know, but a part of him lives in Mateus. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe not." Santiago read it like a verdict. His heart raced. His hands shook. It was true, what he had suspected deep down. That bond he couldn't quite name had a name now. "She was talking about me," he said. "She was," Mateus confirmed. "And I know it now too." The air thickened. Santiago's eyes filled with tears. But he didn't cry. He just stood. Walked to the window. He needed air, a moment, a breath. Mateus stayed seated, waiting for something, anything. "I don't know what to say," Santiago admitted. "Me neither. But maybe we don't have to say everything. Sometimes just knowing changes everything." Santiago turned around. He looked at the boy with different eyes, or maybe the same eyes, but now with meaning. "I missed my chance to be your father all these years. You have a chance now. And do you want that?" Mateus hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I want to try." That word again. Try. Like a seal, a foundation. Santiago stepped forward, kneeling in front of him, held out his hand. "Can I?" Mateus looked at the hand. A hand that once held billions, now asking for just one thing, permission. He placed his hand over Santiago's. "You can." The hug came next, unhurried, quiet. A hug without an audience, too real for a photo. And in that moment, an entire story was sealed. That's when someone knocked at the door. An older man with grey hair and a briefcase. "Excuse me, I'm from the clerk's office, here with the official documents for the foundation." Santiago stood, took the folder, signed, then looked at Mateus. "Your name is going to be on this, as co-founder." Mateus blinked. "But I'm only 12, and you've lived through more than most grown men ever will. That makes you more than ready." Mateus smiled, took the pen, signed with shaky, crooked handwriting, but firm. When the clerk left, Santiago sat down again. Looked at his son. Yes, his son. "There's something else I want to do." "What?" "I want to show you where I live. Not because it's fancy, but because I want you to know the door there is yours now too." Mateus went quiet, then answered in the same tone he'd used weeks ago, offering Santiago juice on a dusty road. "It's not much, but it's what I've got." Santiago smiled. "It's more than enough." But as they walked out the door together, someone was standing at the corner. A woman, wearing a hood, watching, and about to bring everything to a final, unexpected turn. The car climbed through tree-lined streets in the upscale part of town, slowly, like they didn't want to reach the end too soon. Santiago drove with steady hands, his eyes glancing often at the passenger seat. Mateus looked out the window, quietly fascinated. He didn't ask questions, he just watched. The tall gates, the perfect hedges, the polished dogs. A world that had felt like another planet just days ago. "This is it," Santiago said, stopping in front of a black iron gate. The gate opened with a remote. The car rolled in. The house was large, with wide windows and pale stone walls. But what struck Mateus most was the silence. Clean, polished, but lonely. "You live here alone?" he asked. "I used to." They went inside. Santiago showed him everything. The office lined with books, the bedroom with a perfectly made bed, the kitchen with no smell of anything at all, everything in order, everything impersonal. Until now. Mateus walked slowly through each room, his fingers trailing across furniture like he was feeling a new kind of reality. He stopped at a frame above the fireplace, a photo of a younger Santiago at an awards ceremony. "You got that for what?" "For company growth." "Oh. But now, I think I'd trade it for a medal in humanity." Mateus didn't answer, but he smiled just a little. Then for the first time, Santiago did something he'd never done in that house. He opened the fridge, took out 2 glasses, poured boxed juice, made ham sandwiches, and called out, "Want a snack?" They sat at the table, ate in silence, but it was a new kind of silence, a comforting one. After the meal, Mateus stepped out to the balcony. The sky was darkening, city lights flickered on below. Santiago followed. "You can stay as long as you like," he said, "or come back any time. I don't know if I want to live here." "That's okay. But I'd like to come by sometimes. The door will always be open." They stood together, looking out over the city. Then Santiago broke the silence. "Do you remember that day seen on the road?" "I do." "Do you remember what you said?" "That you looked lost." "And I was. But now, I think I found the way." Mateus looked up, pulled a folded paper from his pocket, handed it to Santiago, a new drawing, recent. A man and a boy side by side riding a bike. At the top, in wobbly handwriting, "Family, a place where you don't have to pretend you don't feel." Santiago held the paper like it was a piece of his own heart. But what neither of them knew, it still wasn't the end. That same night, while Mateus slept on the couch, tired from painting, from talking, from feeling, the doorbell rang. Santiago opened it, and standing there was the woman in the hood. For a moment he didn't recognize her. "May I come in?" she asked. He nodded, stunned. She stepped inside, pulled down the hood. It was her, Sophia, thinner, eyes marked by time, but alive. "You," Santiago began. But the words caught. She nodded. "I never left. I was threatened. They reported things I knew. I had to disappear. Stay silent. But now, I heard about the foundation. I heard about what you did, and what you found." Santiago didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or collapse. He just sat down, hands over his face. "He's here," he said, voice trembling. "He thought you were dead." "I know, but I'm ready to explain." Santiago led her to the couch. Mateus lay there, fast asleep, his mother's notebook resting on his chest. Sophia knelt beside him, gently touched his face. He stirred, slowly opened his eyes, and when he saw her, he didn't scream, he didn't cry, he just fell into her arms and stayed there, for long, wordless minutes. Just the 3 of them, embraced, wounded, but alive. The next morning, Santiago came down to the kitchen, made ham sandwiches, poured boxed juice. But this time, he made 3. He carried them to the balcony. Sophia was already sitting. Mateus played nearby with a paper airplane. They sat together. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Santiago wasn't alone. Because now, at his side, there wasn't just a boy. There was an entire story beginning again, and in that story, a father, a mother, and a son. The end? No, just the beginning. Thanks for staying with us until the very last word. But don't go just yet. Tap the next video on your screen for another powerful story. Subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone who believes in second chances. I'll see you there.